My name is Oren Bridges. I'm 66 years old. I live in Paducah, Kentucky, in a craftsman bungalow on a street where I know every neighbor by first name and most of them by electrical panel brand. I was a master electrician for 37 years. Licensed journeyman at 22. Master at 28. Owned Bridges Electric for 31 of those years. We built the electrical systems in half the commercial buildings in McCracken County. I don't say that to brag. I say it so you understand when I tell you. I can trace where the power goes in any system. I mean financial, personal, or otherwise. That's not a metaphor. That's a skill I used 6 days a week for almost 4 decades. I wake up at 5:40 every morning. Coffee's on by 5:45. Black, no sugar. Ruthann used to say I drank my coffee like I ran my business. Plain, hot, and without asking anybody's opinion. By 6:15, I'm in the shop. The shop is a detached garage I converted in 2003. Workbench, soldering station, and a tube amplifier I've been rebuilding since October. It's a 1960s Fender Deluxe Reverb, founded at a yard sale with blown output tubes, a burned transformer, and wiring so corroded it looked like it had been stored underwater. Tube amps are simple systems. Signal in, amplification, signal out. When the wiring is clean, the tone is warm and pure. When somebody's spliced in a connection that doesn't belong, you get distortion. Feedback. Noise. You trace every wire. Find the bad connection. Remove it. Restore the original circuit. I bought it for $40. The parts will cost $300. The satisfaction of hearing a clean signal come out of a system somebody else ruined is worth whatever I paid. Pepper watches me work. Pepper is a 10-year-old black cat. She was Ruthann's cat. She has opinions about everything and contributes to nothing, which makes her the perfect shop supervisor. She sits on the shelf next to the soldering iron and stares at me, like she's filing a performance review. I have never received a positive evaluation. Let me tell you what I did for a living. Not the title, the skill. Every job I ever ran, I drew a circuit map, not a schematic, a map. Hand-drawn on a yellow legal pad. Every wire, every breaker, every connection, every load point. Where the power flows, who's drawing on it, where the system can handle the load, and where someone's wired in something rated for 20 amps on a circuit designed for 15. I could look at a commercial panel and tell you which breaker was carrying more than its share before I touched a wire. I could trace a fault through 3 junction boxes and 200 feet of conduit, the way some people follow a recipe. You learn to see the connections. You learn to see the load. You learn to see where the system's been compromised by somebody who didn't pull a permit and didn't read the code. I thought that skill stayed in the shop when I retired. I was wrong. It followed me home. Took its time, but it followed. Ruthann died 3 years ago. Ovarian cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the end. She was 59 years old. We were married 34 years. Every Sunday evening, Ruthann rang the dinner bell on the back porch. Not a figure of speech. A real bell. Cast iron, mounted to the porch post. The kind you'd find on a farm. Except we weren't farmers. Just a couple in a bungalow who liked the sound of a bell at supper time. She rang it at 5:30. I came in from the shop. We ate together. 34 years. Same bell. Same time. The bell is still on the porch post. I haven't rung it since she died. What she left me was modest and real. The house, owned outright, worth about $210,000. My IBEW pension at $2,300 a month. Savings of $78,000. Life insurance of $125,000. These are not headline numbers. They're the numbers a man earns over a career and a woman protects during a marriage. She said something during chemo that I need you to hear. A Tuesday. Infusion chair. IV in her arm. Magazine in her lap she wasn't reading. She said, "Oren, you're going to be lonely." And lonely is when you make bad wiring decisions. You hook up whatever's available instead of what's rated for the load. Promise me you'll check the rating before you connect. I said I'd be fine. She said, "That's not a promise. That's a deflection. I know the difference." I promised. Remember that. My granddaughter Sophie is 3. She's my daughter Anna's child. Sophie's primary hobby is hiding. Not from fear, from strategy. She approaches hide and seek with the analytical commitment of a small person who has studied every room in Pop's house and identified the optimal concealment positions. Her favorite spot is the cabinet under the bathroom sink. Fits a 3-year-old perfectly. Fits an adult not at all. She once hid there for 11 minutes while I pretended to search. She emerged victorious and smelling like soap. On the back porch, next to the door, the dinner bell hangs on its post. The clapper has a specific tone. I hear it in my memory, the way I hear a 60-cycle hum in a wire. It doesn't make sound anymore, but it's there. And I hear it anyway. 14 months after Ruthann died, I joined a grief support group at First Baptist Church. Pastor David Ruth ran it. Tuesday evenings. 8 or 9 people sitting in folding chairs, telling a room full of strangers the worst thing that ever happened to them. I went because my daughter Anna said I should. I stayed because it was the only hour of the week where I didn't have to pretend I was fine. The 4th week, a woman sat next to me, Connie Rae Shuler, 52 years old. Said her husband died of a heart attack 18 months ago. Said she understood what I was going through because she was going through it too. She cried at the right moments. She touched my arm when I talked about Ruthann. She said, "I understand." And she sounded like she meant it. She suggested coffee after the meeting, then dinner the next week. Then she was at my house on a Saturday, then a weekday. Then she had a drawer, then a closet, then a key. I need to slow down here because I need you to understand something. I was not stupid. I was lonely. Those are different conditions. A stupid man doesn't see the signs. A lonely man sees the signs and decides they're something else. Grief doesn't come with a circuit diagram. It comes with loneliness. And loneliness accepts whatever connection is available without checking the rating. Ruthann told me that. Exact words. Infusion chair. I heard her voice in my head every time Connie moved one step closer. And I told myself Ruthann was being overprotective. From the grave. I argued with a dead woman and lost. Within 6 months, Connie had moved in. Within 8 months, she was answering my phone. Within 10 months, she was checking my mail. She posted photos of my house on Facebook, calling it our little place. The house I bought with Ruthann. The house I rewired with my own hands. Our little place. Now I need to tell you about Connie the way I'd describe a circuit installation. Objectively. By the numbers. Because the numbers are where the truth lives. Connie asked to be added to my checking account so she could help with the bills. That was month 3. I agreed. I should not have agreed. By month 5, she had made $4,200 in purchases I didn't authorize. Not large amounts. Never large amounts. That's not how it works. You don't blow a 20-amp breaker by plugging in a welder. You overload it slowly, one device at a time, until the wire gets hot, and nobody notices until it's too late. Here are the line items. Every dollar gets its own moment, because every dollar was mine. $387 at a furniture store in Paducah. A lamp and 2 end tables. For my house. Purchased without asking me, because it was becoming her house, and she was already decorating it. $612.44 on a credit card I did not know existed. She opened it in both our names. Forged my signature on the application. I'll come back to that signature. $94 per month on a cell phone plan. She put in her name and billed to my account. 3 months before I caught it. That's $282. $1,140 at an auto repair shop in Mayfield. Her car. At a shop I'd never heard of. In a town where her sister Jolene lives. Jolene, who we'll also come back to. $967 at a department store. Also Mayfield. Also near Jolene. $412 in cash withdrawals from the joint account. 4 separate ATM trips. $103 each. Specific enough to look like everyday spending. Random enough to not trigger a pattern. Unless you're a man who's been reading financial documents for 31 years. And you know that $103 is not a number anybody withdraws from an ATM by accident. It's a test amount. She was checking whether I reviewed the statements. I didn't. Not then. Running total, $4,906.44. That was the visible load on the circuit. I suspected there was more behind the walls. There always is. When you find one bad splice, there are 3 more you haven't traced yet. Let me tell you about 2 specific evenings, because these are the moments when I should have seen it, and didn't. The first was a Thursday in July, 8 months in. Connie had reorganized my filing cabinet. She said it was a mess. It wasn't a mess. It was organized by year and category, the same way I organized 31 years of business records. Permits in one drawer, tax documents in another, insurance in a third. I could find any document in that cabinet in under a minute. Connie rearranged the entire system. When I looked for the house deed, it wasn't where it had been for 20 years. She said, I moved it to the top drawer. It's easier to find. It was easier for her to find. She needed that deed for the quick claim filing. She was staging the cabinet the way you stage a room before an open house. I didn't see it. The second was a Saturday in August. 9 months in, Connie invited her sister Jolene over for dinner. At my house, Jolene brought a pie and a measuring tape. I didn't think anything of the measuring tape. Connie said Jolene was thinking about new curtains for her own house and needed to measure something for reference. They measured my kitchen windows. They measured the living room. They measured the bedroom. Jolene wrote the numbers in a small notebook. They were measuring my house in front of me while I ate pie. Jolene said, "Connie, you really fixed this place up nice." She said this to a woman who had hung 3 pictures and moved a filing cabinet. I built the electrical system. I replaced the plumbing in the upstairs bathroom in 2008. I installed the kitchen cabinets myself. Connie hung 3 pictures, and Jolene acted like she'd renovated the Sistine Chapel. The third incident I'll summarize. Connie took my truck to Mayfield twice in 1 week. "Errands," she said. I didn't ask what errands. A man who asks what errands gets told he's controlling. A man who doesn't ask what errands gets. His truck used to transport his own belongings to his girlfriend's sister's storage unit. I didn't find that out until later. But Connie had moved 3 boxes of Ruthann's things, winter clothes, photo albums, and a set of dishes to Jolene's garage. "For safekeeping," she told Jolene. Ruthann's dishes in a stranger's garage. For safekeeping from the man who bought them. Then came the isolation. This is the part that worked. For 10 months, this part worked. Connie told my daughter Anna that she was giving Dad space to heal, and that too many visits overwhelm him. She told Anna this privately at my kitchen table while I was in the shop. She said it the way a nurse explains visiting hours, with authority and concern, and just enough clinical detachment to sound like expertise. Anna believed her. Anna's visits dropped from weekly to monthly. Why wouldn't they? Connie sounded like someone who cared. Connie told me that Anna was busy with Sophie and probably needs her own space. I believed that too. Anna has a 3-year-old. 3-year-olds are consuming. It made sense. I didn't question it because I had no reason to question it. Because I didn't know Connie was running both sides of the circuit. Neither party knew the other was being managed. My daughter thought she was being respectful. I thought she was pulling away. We were both wrong. We were both being routed through a junction box we didn't know existed. Darnell Oakes was next. Darnell is my best friend. 29 years. Retired HVAC technician. We worked alongside each other on 300 jobs. Electricians and HVAC guys share walls, share ceilings, share crawl spaces, and share very specific opinions about each other's routing choices. Darnell has been physically incapable of keeping an opinion to himself for longer than 90 seconds. Since the day I met him in 1997. Connie told Darnell she was worried about Oren being around the shop. All those memories of Ruthann. She suggested I needed a break from the old routines. Darnell's visits dropped from 3 times a week to once every 2 weeks. When he came by, Connie was always present. I was never alone with my best friend. Darnell saw Connie for the first time and said nothing for a full week. Silence from Darnell is a 4-alarm fire. When he finally spoke, he said, "That woman looked at your house. The way I look at a unit I'm about to condemn. She wasn't visiting. She was appraising." I told him he was being protective. He said, "I'm being observational. There's a difference. One requires me to care about your feelings. The other just requires eyes." I didn't listen. Ruthann's warning, echoing again. "Check the rating." I heard it. I nodded at it. I walked right past it. Then, the information isolation. Connie changed my online banking password to help manage the bills. She intercepted mail my neighbor. Angela Stinnett watched her check my mailbox before I did, 3 separate mornings. Angela is a retired postal carrier. She knows what mail interception looks like because she delivered mail for 30 years. Angela started keeping notes, dates and observations in a spiral notebook. I didn't know about those notes until later. Angela was documenting my life the way I document a circuit, because both of us were trained to write down what we see. Connie screened phone calls. She answered my cell when Anna called and said, "Dad's napping." I was in the shop, 40 feet away, fully awake, wondering why Anna hadn't called. I want you to think about that. I'm a man who ran a crew of 14 electricians. I managed union payroll, insurance, bonding, permits, and licensing for 3 decades. Wayne Luttrell, my former business partner, will tell you I handled over $400,000 a year in revenue. I negotiated contracts with general contractors who'd been in the business longer than some countries have existed, and a woman I'd known for less than a year was answering my phone and telling my daughter I was asleep. The worst part isn't that she did it. The worst part is how well it worked. Sophie came over for a Saturday visit, one of the last before Anna's visits slowed to a crawl. Sophie walked into the kitchen, saw Connie, and walked right past her without a word. went straight to the bathroom, hid in the cabinet. Connie said, "Stop hiding, it's not funny." Sophie looked at Connie from inside the cabinet and said, "Yes, it is." Then she closed the door. My 3-year-old granddaughter assessed Connie faster than I did. The child and the cat Pepper moved to the closet the week Connie took Ruthann's side of the bed. Both recognized what I didn't. Children and animals don't override their instincts to be polite. Adults do. I did. Here's my question for you, and I mean it the way I'd ask. A journeyman who found a code violation on someone else's work. If somebody changed one wire a day in a building you walk through every morning, how long before you'd notice the lights were different? Not wrong, different. That's how she did it. One wire at a time. One connection at a time. Until the entire system was rerouted through her, and nobody noticed, because nobody was reading the panel. The baby monitor was Sophie's. A small white unit that sat on the kitchen counter. Anna left it at my house for when Sophie visited. I kept it on because I liked, knowing the house had something in it that was built to protect a child. It was a Thursday evening, October. Connie was in the kitchen on the phone with Jolene, her sister. Jolene Feeney, 48, lives in Mayfield, 25 miles south. Jolene is Connie's logistics coordinator. She helps move belongings, provides a mailing address, stores items, and validates Connie's story to anyone who asks. Jolene tells people Connie finally found a good man. Jolene has said this about 3 men now, but I didn't know that yet. I was in the shop. The monitor was on the counter, transmitting, doing what monitors do, carrying signal from one room to another. I didn't mean to listen. The signal was clear. He still thinks he's married to her. He talks to a photograph. He keeps a bell on the porch nobody rings. He's stuck, and he'll stay stuck unless someone moves him forward. I'm doing him a favor. I'm giving him a reason to stop living in 2023. She said it the way someone describes a renovation project. Remove the old fixtures. Update the layout. She wasn't talking about a man she loved. She was talking about a property she was developing. My grief was the demo phase. My loneliness was the open floor plan. My bell, Ruthann's bell, was the fixture she intended to remove. I sat down on the shop stool. I didn't move for a while. A bell on the porch, nobody rings. That bell was our 34 years of sitting down to supper together. And Connie reduced it to a symptom. Evidence that I was stuck. Evidence that I needed to be moved. By her. Forward. Into whatever she had planned for a man she thought was too old and too sad to notice he was being robbed. A device designed to protect a child caught a predator. Ruthann's voice. The infusion chair. The magazine. Promise me you'll check the rating before you connect. I heard it now. Not as a warning, as a diagnosis. Ruthann saw Connie coming. Not Connie specifically, but the type. The connection that's available when you're lonely. The one that isn't rated for the load. The one that looks like it fits, but runs hot under pressure and eventually burns the circuit. I didn't confront Connie. I didn't say a word. I went inside. I ate supper. I said it was good. I watched her face and I saw the surface warm, caring, concerned. And I saw what was behind it. The same way I can look at a wall and know the wiring behind. It is wrong. Before I open a single cover plate, you develop the eye. You can't undevelop it. I knew what she was. She didn't know I knew. I sat in the shop that night after Connie fell asleep. Pepper sat on the workbench. The fender sat next to her, guts exposed, wires hanging. A broken system, waiting to be traced. I pulled a legal pad from the drawer. Yellow. College ruled. The same kind I used for every circuit map for 37 years. I wrote the date at the top. Then I drew the first circuit map. Not electrical. Financial. The circuit map. Financial wiring. Same format I'd used since I was 22 years old. Every wire. Every breaker. Every connection. Every load point. My checking account Connie added month 3. $4,200 in unauthorized charges documented. Online banking password changed by Connie. Mail intercepted. Angela's notes document 3 instances. Phone screened by Connie. Anna told I was sleeping. Credit card opened in both names. Forged signature. $612 charged. Cell phone plan billed to my account without authorization. $282 over 3 months. Cash withdrawals. $412. 4 transactions at $103 each. I drew lines between the points. I labeled each connection. I calculated the total load. $4,906.44. That was what I could trace. The number I couldn't see was larger. It always is. 1 bad wire means 3 more behind the wall. Through the shop window I could see the porch. The dinner bell caught the light. Ruthann hung that bell in 1993. I wired the porch light the same year. Both still working. Both still in their original position. Unlike everything else. I sat with the map for a long time. Then I called Darnell. 9:40 at night. He picked up on the second ring. He said, "Either somebody died, or you finally figured it out." I said, "Nobody died." He said, "Good. Then pour yourself something. I've been waiting 11 months for this conversation, and I intend to enjoy it." I told him what I heard on the monitor. I told him the dollar amounts. I told him about the isolation. Anna, Darnell himself, the phone screening. Darnell was quiet for 4 seconds. A personal record. He said, "She told me you needed space from the shop. She said being around your tools triggered memories of Ruthann. I knew that was wrong because Ruthann never once set foot in your shop. Ruthann said your shop smelled like solder and bad decisions. She wasn't wrong about that, but she loved you anyway." I almost laughed. He said, "My daughter can run a background check by morning. You want me to call her, or do you want to keep pretending this is a misunderstanding?" I said, "Run it." He said, "Oren, I want you to hear me. That woman didn't find you at a grief group. She found you the way a bad thermostat finds a good furnace, by being installed where she doesn't belong. And I've been watching the temperature drop in this house for 11 months. I hired an attorney. Nadine Buckner, elder law. Paducah. $3,500 retainer. I paid from the savings account. Connie didn't know about a separate account Ruthann set up years ago. Connie never found it, because Connie didn't know Ruthann. She knew Ruthann's side of the bed. She knew Ruthann's cat. She knew Ruthann's bell. She didn't know Ruthann. Nadine is 71. She's practiced elder law in Western Kentucky for 40 years. She has a framed cross-stitch in her office that says, "I bill by the hour," and "I don't lose." I liked her immediately. Nadine told me to document everything. I said I'd already started. I showed her the circuit map. She looked at it for a long time. She said, "I've been doing this for 4 decades. Nobody has ever brought me a wiring diagram of financial fraud. This is the most organized thing I've ever seen from a client." I said, "Ma'am, I drew maps like this for 37 years. The system's the same. The wires just carry money instead of current." Nadine said, "Do not confront her. Do not change your routine. Do not let her know you know anything. Keep paying the bills. Keep acting normal. Every day you act normal is a day she thinks the system is running clean. And every day she thinks that is a day you have to build the case." I said, "That's going to cost me money." She said, "Yes, it is. It's going to cost you every dollar she takes between now and the day we pull the breaker. Can you live with that?" I said, "I've been paying for her mistakes for 10 months. A few more weeks of documented mistakes is an investment." Nadine smiled. She said, "I like working with businessmen. Now here's where the career did the work. I pulled my own bank statements every month. I sat at the kitchen table while Connie was at Jolene's for the weekend. I went through every transaction for the previous 10 months. Career skill, when you trace a circuit. You check every junction. You don't skip a breaker because it looks fine. You check every one, because the breaker that looks fine is the one that's about to fail. Finding one. The $612 credit card Connie opened was in both our names. She forged my signature on the application. I know my own signature the way Marcy Griggs knows. My signature, because I've written it on 10,000 documents over 31 years. The signature on that application was close, but close isn't right. It was like a wire stripped a 1/4 inch too short. Functional if you don't look. Obvious if you do. Finding 2. The quitclaim deed. Nadine suggested I check the county clerk's records for any filings on my property. Marcy Griggs, a real estate attorney in Paducah, pulled them. There it was. A quitclaim deed filed 6 weeks prior, adding Connie Rae Shuler to the title of my house. My signature. Forged. Marcy said, "Oren, this isn't your signature. I've seen your signature 200 times. This is someone who's seen your signature twice." That's the moment. That's when I stopped being angry and started being methodical. Anger is a short circuit, blows the breaker, shuts the system down. Methodology keeps the power on. I needed the power on. I drew the second circuit map. The circuit map. Isolation wiring. Same format. Same yellow legal pad. Every connection. Every load point. Anna's visits managed by Connie. Weekly to monthly. Mechanism told Anna I was overwhelmed. Told me Anna was busy. Darnell's visits managed by Connie. 3 per week to bi-weekly. Mechanism told Darnell the shop triggered memories. Phone screened by Connie. Anna told I was sleeping when I was in the shop. Mail intercepted by Connie. documented by Angela 3 times with dates. I drew the lines. Every relationship in my life passed through Connie before it reached me. She'd wired herself into the center of the system. She was the junction box. Every signal filtered through her. Every load went through her panel. An electrician knows that when all the power in a building routes through a single point, that point has control over everything downstream. And if that point fails, or if that point is corrupt, everything connected to it goes dark. Community members started contributing without being asked. Pastor David Routh at First Baptist. I asked about the grief group records. He checked. Connie attended exactly 4 sessions. She stopped coming after she connected with me. She never shared her own story in the group. Not once. She sat next to me every week. She left when she had what she came for. Pastor Ruth said, I thought she was shy. Looking back, I think she was shopping. Angela Stinnett, my neighbor, 22 years, retired postal carrier. Angela brought me her notebook, 3 spiral pages of dates and observations. She'd watched Connie check my mailbox 3 mornings. She'd noticed I stopped going to the shop in the mornings, stopped driving to the hardware store Saturdays, stopped sitting on the porch. Angela said, You used to wave at me every morning at 6:30. You haven't waved since you moved in. I wrote it down. That's what carriers do. Angela had 17 entries in her notebook, 17 mornings where something was different. Some were small Connie checking the mail, Oren not on the porch, an unfamiliar car in the driveway at 7:00 a.m. Some were specific. October 3rd. Connie carried a box, marked kitchen, to the trunk of Jolene's car. Oren was in the shop. Box appeared to contain dishes. Angela didn't know those were Ruthann's dishes. I didn't know either. Not yet. But Angela wrote it down because 30 years of delivering mail teaches you that. When somebody carries boxes out of a house, while the homeowner is in the garage, you note the date. Wayne Luttrell, my former business partner. 15 years running the commercial division of Bridges Electric. Wayne provided a written statement about my financial competence. 31 years of business tax returns. Union payroll for 14 employees. Insurance. Bonding. Permits. Licensing. Quarterly filings with the state. Annual filings with the IRS. Workers' compensation audits. Wayne wrote, Oren Bridges managed the financial operations of a commercial electrical contracting company for 31 consecutive years without a single audit deficiency, a single missed payroll, or a single lapsed insurance policy. His financial competence is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of public record. Wayne also said, off the record, if she thinks Oren can't read a bank statement, she's never seen him read a change order. At 2:00 in the morning, during a hospital expansion. The man reads numbers the way some people read faces. He can't help it. Marcy Griggs identified the forged quitclaim deed. She knows my signature from 200 closings over 20 years. She'd watched me sign documents since 2004. The forgery was amateur, close enough to file with a county clerk who processes 60 deeds a week and doesn't compare signatures. Not close enough to survive a professional comparison. Marcy said she could testify in court that the signature was not mine. She said it would take her about 4 seconds to prove it. Now let me tell you about playing dumb. Playing dumb is expensive, not just in money. In dignity. You sit across the table from a person who is stealing from you, and you smile, and you nod, and you act grateful. And the whole time, your brain is running a diagnostic on every word, she says, and filing it in a folder she doesn't know exists. It costs something to do that. It costs a piece of how you see yourself. But I've been on job sites where the general contractor was wrong, and I knew he was wrong, and I documented he was wrong, and I didn't say a word until the inspector arrived. You learn to hold your findings. Connie explained to me one afternoon how to use the banking app on my phone. She did it slowly. She used small words. She pointed at the screen and said, See, Oren? You just tap here, and it shows you the balance. I'm a man who wired the electrical system of a 4-story hospital addition in 1996. I programmed a PLC controller before most people knew what a PLC was. I built my own website in 2003. It was ugly, but it worked. Kind of like me. She thought I couldn't find a bank balance on a phone. I played dumb. I said, Show me again, honey. Slower. She showed me again. I nodded. I said, Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. I knew exactly what I'd do without her. I was documenting it. I know. And they don't know I know. I had one financial circuit map documenting $4,906 in unauthorized charges. One forged credit card application. One forged quitclaim deed. 3 documented instances of mail interception. Angela's notebook. Pastor Routh's attendance records. Marcy's professional identification of the forged signature, Wayne's competence statement, and a baby monitor recording, transferred to a USB drive and locked in the shop safe. Connie thought she was teaching a confused old man how to use a phone. She was living in the house of a man who had drawn 2 circuit maps of her operation and filed them with his attorney. The amp sat on the workbench. I'd found the burned transformer that week, traced it back to a splice someone made years ago, a connection that didn't belong, wired in by someone who didn't check the load rating. The splice drew too much current. The transformer overheated. The system distorted. Same story. Different wiring. Now here's my moral question. I'm asking it the way I'd ask a journeyman who found a code violation in someone else's building. When you trace every wire, and you know the system is dangerous, do you pull the breaker now, or do you let it run until you've mapped the whole circuit? I needed the whole map, so I let it run. Every day I didn't confront her cost me money. Playing dumb is expensive, but the full map was worth the price. Connie got bolder. That's what happens when a system runs unchecked. The load increases. She started talking about marriage, not hints. Plans. She mentioned a courthouse ceremony. She mentioned combining our finances into a single account at a new bank. She asked about my pension, not casually. Specifically, she said, if something happened to you, I'd need to know how to keep things running. She said this the way you'd ask about the thermostat. Practical. Operational. She brought home a folder of estate planning printouts from the internet, printed on my printer, using my ink. She sat me down at the kitchen table and explained, pointing at each page, what a beneficiary was. She spoke slowly. She enunciated. She used the word basically 4 times. I am a man who established beneficiary designations on 14 separate employee pension accounts over 31 years. I filled out the paperwork. I filed the forms. I answered the questions when employees didn't understand the forms. I had a laminated quick reference card in my desk drawer, explaining the difference between revocable and irrevocable beneficiary designations, because my guys needed it during open enrollment. I designed the card. Connie was explaining beneficiaries to a man who literally laminated the definition. I said, "That's helpful, Connie. I never really understood that stuff." She patted my hand. She said, "That's what I'm here for, babe." She patted my hand twice, like I was a dog who'd learned a new trick. The audience needs to understand something. She was sitting in the kitchen of a man whose dead wife had built an irrevocable trust, a transfer on death deed, and a sealed letter with an attorney. 3 of the most sophisticated estate protection mechanisms available under Kentucky law. And she was explaining to him, using internet printouts, what a beneficiary was. The late wife had already done the graduate level work. Connie was teaching the kindergarten version to the wrong student. What she didn't know, my IBEW pension has a named beneficiary, Anna. Changing it requires my real signature on a form submitted to the union office. She didn't know about the transfer on death deed Ruthann filed on the house, or the irrevocable trust, or the sealed letter. She didn't know about any of the walls. Connie brought home a brochure for a joint bank account at a new institution one evening. She sat me down at the kitchen table. The table where Ruthann rang the bell and explained, slowly, how a joint account would simplify things. I nodded. I said, "That's real thoughtful. Let me think on it." I filed the brochure with Nadine the next morning. Nadine said, "She's accelerating. She's moving toward the property. We need to move faster. Playing dumb cost money." During the weeks I waited, Connie made 3 more purchases. $340 at a home goods store. $217 on groceries I didn't eat. She was buying supplies for Jolene's house and charging them to my account. $195 at a salon. She came home with new hair and told me she wanted to look nice for you. She looked nice for me at my expense. Every receipt documented. Every dollar noted on the circuit map. Missed calls from Connie to Jolene. I started tracking the phone records through Nadine's subpoena. 11 calls the first week I tracked. Coordinating. Planning. The load on the circuit was increasing. I know. And they don't know I know. Second instance. By this point, my documentation included 2 circuit maps, a forged deed, a forged credit card application, a baby monitor recording on USB, Angela's notebook, Pastor Routh's records, Marcy's professional opinion, Wayne's competence statement, and 3 weeks of additional purchase documentation, all filed with Nadine, all organized the way I organize every job. Date, time, location, observed condition, deviation from standard, corrective action pending. Connie was measuring the kitchen for new cabinets. In my house, the house she'd filed a forged deed on, she was picking tile samples. She said, We should really update this kitchen. It's stuck in the 90s. This kitchen is where Ruthann rang the bell. This is the kitchen where we ate supper for 34 years. It's not stuck in the 90s. It's built in the 90s. By me. I wired it myself. The outlet spacing is to code. The lighting is balanced. The circuits are clean. Connie came into the shop that week. She never came into the shop. She looked at the fender on the workbench and said, "Why don't you just buy a new one? It'd be easier." A woman who forges deeds told me to throw away something worth fixing. I said, "I like fixing things." She said, "Some things aren't worth fixing, Oren." She meant me. I meant the amplifier. We were both telling the truth. The second playing dumb performance happened 2 days later. Connie brought home a stack of papers from a title company. She said she'd been researching how to protect the house in case something happened to one of us. She spread the papers on the kitchen table and walked me through each one, like I was a first-year apprentice reading his first wiring diagram. She pointed at a paragraph and said, "This part means nobody can take the house if you get sick." I looked at the paragraph. It was a standard joint tenancy agreement. I've read joint tenancy agreements on 7 properties. I wired over 3 decades. I've signed closing documents. I've sat in title company offices. I've read legalese so dense it would make a law student cry. And I've understood it. Because when you're bonded and insured and licensed by the state, you learn to read every document that crosses your desk. Or you learn to lose money. I said, "That sounds real smart, Connie. So both our names would be on the house?" She smiled. She said, "That way we're both protected." I nodded slowly. I let my eyes go slightly unfocused, the way old people do in movies. Not the way old people actually look, but the way a 52-year-old woman, who thinks she's smarter than a 66-year-old man, expects an old person to look. I said, "I'd like to sleep on it." She said, "Of course, honey. No rush." There was rush. There was enormous rush. Nadine had already flagged the title company. Connie used the same one she'd used for Pete Delvecchio's quitclaim deed. The same company. 3 years apart. 2 different men. Same title company. That detail went into the file. That detail went to the AG. I walked back to the shop. I looked at the fender. The transformer was rebuilt. The tubes were seated. One more splice to trace, and the amp would play clean again. One more connection to document, and Connie's circuit would be fully mapped. Then came the worst discovery. Darnell's daughter, the paralegal at the family law firm, delivered the full background check. She'd pulled court records from 2 counties. She'd made calls. She'd spoken to an attorney in Marshall County who handled a familiar-sounding divorce. Not one previous man. 2. Gary Shuler, 2012 to 2016. Connie's first husband. She opened 3 credit cards in his name, ran up $31,000 in debt. Gary discovered it when a collection agency called him at work. The divorce filing documents the credit fraud. Gary got a judgment. Connie paid $8,000 before the payment stopped. Gary gave up collecting. $23,000 still outstanding. Pete Delvecchio, 2017 to 2020. Connie's second husband. She attempted to add herself to the deed of his house, a house Pete's first wife had left him when she died. Same mechanism. Quit-claim deed. Pete's attorney caught it during a refinance. Divorce filed within a month. Pete told Darnell's daughter. She was measuring the house before the paint dried on the marriage certificate. 3 men. 3 houses. Same circuit. Find a man alone. Move in fast. Access the finances. Target the property. The grief group wasn't grief. It was a pipeline. She sat in those folding chairs, the way I sit in my truck outside a commercial building before a bid, assessing, estimating, deciding whether the job is worth taking. I wasn't the partner. I was a project. The comedy stops here, because this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't loneliness making bad choices. It was a system. Tested on Gary, refined on Pete, deployed on 3 iterations, each one smoother than the last. She learned from her failures. She improved her process. That's not chaos. That's engineering. Bad engineering. Unethical engineering. But engineering. Missed calls Connie to Jolene, 37 that week. The logistics coordinator was busy. Connie said to me that evening, "You seem quiet." I said, "Just thinking about the amp." She said, "You spend too much time on that thing." I said, "It's almost done. Just need to trace one more connection." She didn't hear it. She never heard it. I set the confrontation for a Saturday. Connie thought she was coming to dinner. I dressed the way I dress for a job that matters. Clean shirt, pressed collar, my good boots. I took the clapper off Ruthann's dinner bell that morning, cleaned the rust, put it in my shirt pocket, cold iron against my chest. I wanted her in the room. Nadine arrived at 400. She sat up at the kitchen table, with a folder thick enough to stabilize a wobbly table leg. She had 3 copies of everything. She said, "I don't leave things to memory. Memory is what people argue about. Paper is what judges read." Darnell arrived at 4:15. He wore a tie. I have seen Darnell in a tie twice in 29 years. His daughter's wedding and his mother's funeral. He said, "I wore the tie because I wanted her to know this isn't casual." He sat in the chair closest to the door. He said, "I'm not here to talk. I'm here so you don't have to do this alone." Then, "Also, I want to see her face when you open that folder." Pepper was in the kitchen. She sat on the counter next to the baby monitor, which was off. The monitor had done its job. Now the paperwork would do the rest. At 500, Connie and Jolene pulled into the driveway. Jolene drove. They came through the back door. Connie saw Nadine. She saw the folder. She saw Darnell and the tie. She stopped in the doorway. She said, "What is this?" I said, "Sit down, Connie." She sat. Jolene sat next to her. 5 people at the table. The table where Ruthann and I ate supper for 34 years. The table Connie wanted to replace. For about 90 seconds, nobody spoke. Connie looked at me, then Nadine, then the folder. She tried to smile. It didn't take. Like a wire nut, hand tightened by somebody in a hurry. Holds for a second, then slips. I said one sentence. "I heard you on the baby monitor." Her face went blank, not confused. Recalculating. I've seen that look on a subcontractor who realizes. The inspector arrived an hour early. I opened the 3rd circuit map. The circuit map. Full system. Same format. Same yellow legal pad. Every wire. Every breaker. Every connection. Every load point. Everything. I laid it on the table. I pointed to the first section. Financial wiring. Joint checking account. You added yourself March 14th. By May, you'd drawn $4,200 in unauthorized purchases. I read each line item. Every dollar. Every store. Every amount. $387 at Graham's Furniture. A lamp and 2 end tables. For my house. Purchased without asking. I slid the bank statement across. Yellow highlight. $612.44 on a credit card. You opened in both our names. I slid the credit card application across. Red tab on the signature page. You forged my signature. Marcy Griggs will testify to that. $94 a month on a cell phone plan billed to my account. 3 months. $282. 3 statements. 3 highlights. $1,140 at Henderson Auto in Mayfield. Your car. Your sister's town. $967 at Belk's department store. Also Mayfield. Also near Jolene. I paused. I let the papers settle. $412 in cash. 4 ATM withdrawals. 103 each. Not a round number. A test amount. You were checking whether I looked. I slid the ATM receipts across. Dates, times, locations. 340 at Home Goods. 217 in groceries for Jolene's kitchen on my account. 195 at a salon. More paper. More highlights. Total documented $5,658.44. The papers covered the kitchen table like a circuit map made of bank statements, which is exactly what they were. I pointed to the second section. Isolation wiring. I laid Angela Stinnett's notebook open on the table. 17 entries. Dates and observations. You told Anna, too many visits overwhelmed me. You told me she was busy. Neither of us knew. Her visits went from weekly to monthly. You told Darnell the shop triggered memories of Ruthann. I looked at Connie. She never set foot in my shop. You screened my phone. You told Anna I was napping. I was in the shop, 40 feet away. Angela's 3 documented instances of mail interception were flagged in the notebook. Dates, times. My neighbor has been a postal carrier for 30 years. She knows what mail interception looks like. I pointed to the 3rd section. The property. Quit claim deed. Filed 6 weeks ago. Forged my signature. I slid Marcy Griggs' professional assessment across the table. Marcy has seen my real signature 200 times over 20 years. She identified the forgery in 10 seconds. She'll testify. Under oath. Wayne Luttrell's competence statement was next. 31 years of business tax returns. $400,000 in annual revenue. Union payroll. Bonding. Licensing. A man who ran that company does not forget how money works, because a woman changed his banking password. Pastor Routh's attendance records. 4 sessions. Then gone. She left when she had what she came for. Then I deployed the worst discovery. Gary Shuler, 2012. 3 credit cards in his name. $31,000. Judgment. Filed. $23,000 still unpaid. I laid the divorce filing on the table. Pete Del Vecchio, 2017. Quitclaim deed on his dead wife's house. Same mechanism. Same forgery. His attorney caught it during a refinance. I laid Pete's divorce filing next to Gary's. 3 men. 3 houses. Same circuit. I looked at Connie. And I said, and I have never spoken to another person like this in my life. You said I keep a bell on the porch nobody rings. You said I'm stuck. You said you were doing me a favor. That bell is the only honest thing left in this house. And you are the reason I know the difference. Nobody spoke for a long time. Connie tried denial. She said, "These are misunderstandings, Oren. I was trying to help manage things. You're getting confused." Nadine opened the forged credit card application. She laid it next to the quitclaim deed, side by side. 2 forged signatures. She said, "Mrs. Shuler, both of these documents contain forged signatures. I have a real estate attorney's sworn identification. 31 years of comparison. Signatures. And divorce filings from 2 previous husbands, documenting the same pattern. Would you like to continue this conversation here? Or would you prefer a courtroom?" Connie tried deflection. She turned to Darnell. "You put him up to this. You never liked me. You've been against me from the beginning." Darnell straightened his tie. He said, "Ma'am, I have been waiting 11 months to say this, so I'm going to take my time." He leaned forward. "I didn't put him up to anything. He's a master electrician. He traced the wires. That's what he does. That's what he's done every day for 37 years. The only thing I did was wait for him to start asking the right questions. And you're right. I didn't like you. My furnace doesn't like a bad thermostat either. It's not personal. It's diagnostic." Connie tried attack. She looked at me directly and said, "You're a lonely old man who can't let go of his dead wife. I gave you a year of my life. I cooked for you. I cleaned. I was here. And this is how you repay me?" I said, "You gave me a year of invoices, Connie. I documented every one. That's how I repay you." With accuracy. Jolene hadn't spoken since she sat down. She stared at the circuit maps. All 3 of them. Financial wiring. Isolation wiring. Full system. She stared at the divorce filings, Gary's and Pete's. She stared at Marcy's signature analysis. She looked at Connie once. One look. About 3 seconds. And then she looked at the table. Jolene, the logistics coordinator. Jolene, who stored the items Connie removed from my house, including Ruthann's dishes, which Angela documented leaving in a box on October 3rd. Jolene, who provided a mailing address for redirected documents. Jolene, who told people Connie finally found a good man. Jolene had said that about 3 men now. She didn't say it that evening. She sat very still, and she looked at the wood grain of a table that had been in this house, longer than Connie had been in my life. The table was more honest than anyone on Connie's side of it. Jolene said one thing, quiet, almost to herself. She said, "I drove, that's all. I drove." Meaning I drove Connie here. I drove Connie to Pete's house. I drove Connie to the title company. I drove Connie to the department store. I drove. I enabled. I participated. And now I'm sitting at a table, covered in evidence. And I understand what I drove. Nadine let the silence work. Then she laid out the legal position. Emergency protective order, under Kentucky's Adult Protection Act. Filed Monday. Civil complaint for recovery of diverted funds through McCracken County Circuit Court. Complaint to the Kentucky Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, documenting the pattern across 3 men. And then the walls. Nadine said, "I should inform you that Mr. Bridges' late wife established an irrevocable trust for the life insurance proceeds, $125,000. Named beneficiaries, his daughter and granddaughter. Mr. Bridges is not a trustee. His late wife's sister is. The funds are outside the estate, outside any marital claim, outside the reach of any power of attorney or quitclaim deed." Connie's expression changed. Not denial this time. Not deflection. Not attack. Something behind it collapsed. The surface held for about 2 seconds. And then it didn't, because the trust was $125,000 she'd been counting on. The house was the asset she'd been measuring for, and both were gone. Had been gone since before she walked through the door. Additionally, Mrs. Bridges filed a transfer on death deed on this house, 5 months before she passed. The house transfers directly to Anna upon Oren's death. It bypasses probate entirely. Your quitclaim deed was filed after the TOD deed. Under Kentucky law, the TOD supersedes it. The house was never available to you. It was transferred before you existed in Mr. Bridges' life. Connie said, "He didn't tell me about any of that." Nadine said, "He didn't know. His wife built the protections without telling him." Connie looked at me. "You didn't know?" I said, "No." Connie said, "Then why did she?" Nadine said, "Mrs. Bridges included a letter, sealed, to be opened if anyone outside the family attempted to modify the deed, access the trust, or claim marital interest in the estate." Nadine opened the sealed letter. She read one line. "I told you to check the rating. I hope you listened. If you didn't, the walls will hold anyway. I made sure. Love, Ruthann." Nobody spoke. Let me tell you what that moment felt like. It felt like finding a breaker in a panel you didn't install, labeled in your wife's handwriting, wired perfectly, protecting the entire system. You didn't know it was there. You didn't ask for it. But it was there because she knew you. She knew you'd be stubborn. She knew you'd be lonely. She knew you'd connect whatever was available without checking the rating. And she loved you anyway. So she wired the protection herself. And she didn't tell you. Because telling you would have started an argument. And she was too busy dying to argue. That's my wife. 3 years gone. Still wiring the house. Still checking connections. Still making sure the system holds. Even when the man she married forgets to run the inspection. She didn't trust me to listen. She was right not to. She built the walls to hold, whether I listened or not. The dead woman outbuilt the living one. That's the detail that stays with me. That's the detail I want you to take home. I said, "Your things are in boxes in the garage. Darnell helped me pack them this morning. Everything that's yours is there. Nothing that's mine is in them." I checked. Connie stood. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't apologize. She picked up her purse and she walked to the door. Jolene followed. Jolene hadn't looked at Connie since I drove. They walked out the back door. The same door Connie used the first time she came over with a casserole. Same door. Different direction. The screen door closed. I heard Jolene's car start. I heard it back out of the driveway. I heard it turn onto the street, and I heard it drive away. I sat at the table. The circuit maps were spread across the surface. 3 maps. 3 months of work. 37 years of professional training. Applied to the worst project I ever ran. But it was done. The circuit was traced. The fault was identified. The bad splice was removed. Missed calls logged during the month before the confrontation. Connie to Jolene. 107. Phone records subpoenaed by Nadine. Every call documented. Every one of them a coordination call for a scheme that hit 3 walls. Built by a woman who'd been dead for 3 years. Darnell sat with me. Nadine organized the folder. Pepper jumped onto the table and sat on the 3rd circuit map, like it was the most comfortable piece of evidence she'd ever found. Darnell said, "You all right?" I said, "No, but I'm accurate." He said, "That's the same thing for you." He wasn't wrong. Nadine filed the emergency protective order Monday, granted Tuesday. The civil complaint went through McCracken County Circuit Court the following week. Total documented exploitation, $5,658 in unauthorized charges, including the playing dumb period purchases, plus $3,500 in legal fees for Nadine, plus $1,200 for the deed correction through Marcy Griggs' office, plus court filing costs. Restitution ordered. Total, $10,817. Every dollar traced. Every dollar documented on a circuit map, drawn by a man Connie thought couldn't use a phone. Marcy Griggs filed the deed correction with the McCracken County Clerk's office. The forged quitclaim was reversed. The house was mine. Always had been. Always will be until the TOD deed transfers it to Anna. Marcy told me afterward, that quitclaim wouldn't have survived a title search anyway. But the fact that she filed, it tells you everything about how much due diligence she does. She doesn't research. She assumes. And assumptions don't hold up in court. The complaint to the Kentucky AG's Consumer Protection Division documented the full pattern. Gary Shuler, Pete Delvecchio, Oren Bridges, 3 men, 1 woman, 1 system. The complaint creates a state record that follows. Connie Rae Shuler, anywhere in Kentucky. If she joins another grief group. If she sits next to another widower. If she brings another casserole to another lonely man's house. The record is there, waiting. Permanent. The grief support group at First Baptist was informed. Pastor Ruth didn't make an announcement. He didn't have to. He adjusted his screening process. He told Nadine, "I run a grief group, not a dating service. If I'd known she was shopping my congregation, I'd have locked the door." He keeps Nadine's number on file now, for the next time someone attends 4 sessions, and leaves with a widower instead of peace. Gary Shuler's unpaid judgment, the $23,000 still owed from the credit fraud, was revived by the AG's office. as part of the pattern documentation. Gary called Nadine's office. He said, "I thought I was the only one." He wasn't. He was the first. I was the third. There doesn't need to be a fourth. That's what the filing is for. Jolene stopped returning Connie's calls. The logistics coordinator closed the operation. I heard through Angela that Jolene told a neighbor in Mayfield, "I'm done driving. I don't know if that's permanent. I know it's current." When the enabler stops enabling, the system runs out of support infrastructure. An electrician knows that when you lose your ground wire, the circuit becomes dangerous to the person running it. 3 weeks after the confrontation. 1,000 at night. My phone rang. Connie's number. I picked up. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm still the man who answers the phone when it rings. She said, "The apartment doesn't sound right." I didn't say anything. She said, "It's too quiet. I don't know. I keep waiting for something." Her voice cracked. Not the crack she performed in the grief group. Not charm. Not strategy. The crack of a person who had spent so long wiring herself into other people's lives that she'd never built a circuit of her own. She didn't know what she was missing because she'd never learned its name. The thing she was waiting for. The sound, the rhythm, the routine of a life someone built from real materials. She'd never had it. She'd only stolen pieces of it. And stolen pieces don't make sound when they're gone. They just leave silence where the signal used to be. I listened. I did not rescue. I said, "I can't help you with that, Connie." She hung up. I sat in the dark. Pepper climbed onto my lap. 10 years old, 9 pounds. She'd been over-grooming since Connie moved in. A bald patch behind her left ear that Dr. Kim, her vet, documented as stress-related onset approximately 6 months ago. The exact month Connie arrived. The cat's medical records were inadvertent evidence. Nobody asked Pepper to testify. Her body did it for her. A cat with 9 years of consistent vet records and 1 year of stress. Grooming that aligns perfectly with the timeline of a financial predator moving into the house. Pepper's bald patch was more honest than Connie's grief story. So the next man she finds at a grief group has somewhere to start. That's why I filed with the AG. Not for me, for him. For the man sitting in a folding chair right now, missing his wife. Not knowing the woman next to him is counting his house. Anna came to the house the following week, alone. She stood in the doorway. She looked thinner. She looked tired. She looked like a person who'd been awake at 200 a.m. running through every time she didn't visit, and understanding, finally, why. She said, "I should have come more." I said, "You were told not to." She said, "I should have come anyway." I said, "You stood there while she told you I was overwhelmed." You believed her. You stopped bringing Sophie on Saturdays. You let a stranger decide how often you saw your father. Anna said, "She seemed like she cared about you, Dad." I said, "She seemed like a lot of things." Anna said, "I'm sorry, I didn't." I said, "I've decided something. I'm not closing the door on you, but I'm not pretending the last year didn't happen either. If you want a relationship with me, a real one, not one rooted through somebody else, it starts from here. New circuit. Clean wiring. You call me directly. You visit when you want. And if anyone ever tells you your father doesn't want to see you, you walk through the door and ask me yourself." Anna said, "I was trying to respect her position. She was your partner." I said, "She forged a deed on my house. She opened credit cards in my name. She told you I was sleeping when I was 40 feet away, wondering why you hadn't called. That's not a partner, Anna. That's an installation without a permit." Anna said, "You could have called me." I said, "She was answering my phone." That's documented in the file. Angela saw it. Nadine has the phone records. I didn't stop calling you, Anna. She stopped you from reaching me. There's a difference. Anna stood in the doorway for a long time. She didn't cry. She's not a crier. She's like Ruthann that way. She processes things by going still. She went very still. She said, "Where do we start?" I said, "You start by coming over Saturday. Bring Sophie. Don't call first. Just come." That's how it used to work. That's how it works again. She nodded. She didn't hug me. That was fine. We're not there yet, but she nodded. And a nod from my daughter is worth more than a year of casseroles from a stranger. Saturday morning, November. I wake up at 5:40. Coffee at 5:45. Black. No sugar. The house is quiet, the way a house is supposed to be quiet. Not empty. Quiet. Not managed quiet. Just morning quiet. The kind of quiet where the only sound is a coffee maker and a cat jumping off the bed. Pepper slept on Ruthann's side last night. First time in over a year. The bed is right again. I walk to the shop. The air smells like solder and old pine and November. The Fender Deluxe Reverb sits on the workbench. Done. New output tubes. Rebuilt transformer. Every wire traced. Every corroded connection replaced. Every bad splice removed. The system is clean. I plug it in. I plug in a guitar I borrowed from Wayne's nephew. I play one chord. Open G. The tone comes through warm and clear. No distortion. No feedback. No noise. Just the signal, amplified. The way the system was designed to work. Before somebody wired. In a connection that didn't belong. I set the amplifier on the shelf. Next to it, I put Ruthann's dinner bell clapper cleaned, polished, and reattached to the bell housing. I carried both to the porch. Hung the bell back on its post. The clapper sat true. Pepper is on the workbench shelf. She stares at the space where the amp used to be like. She's already written the loss into her records. Sophie comes over that afternoon. Anna brings her. Sophie walks through the door, assesses the room for tactical concealment options, and disappears. I find her 12 minutes later in the cabinet under the bathroom sink. She is wearing a paper crown from daycare. She smells like soap and victory. I carry her to the porch. She sees the bell. She reaches for the clapper. She rings it. 4 times. Loud. Joyful. Without knowing what it means, or why a 66-year-old man has to look at the yard for a minute before he can speak. She rings it because she's 3 and it's a bell, and bells are for ringing. I hear Ruthann in the iron. Same bell. Different hand. The sound carries across the yard and over the street, where Angela Stinnett is probably writing down the date and time in her spiral notebook. Anna stands in the doorway. She watches Sophie ring the bell. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't need to. Darnell comes by that evening. He looks at the finished amplifier through the shop window. He looks at the circuit maps, still pinned to the wall. He looks at Pepper, who ignores him as a matter of professional policy. He says, "So let me make sure I understand this correctly. A woman who has been running the same play on lonely men for 14 years, walked into a grief support group, picked the master electrician, the man who literally draws maps of where the power goes for a living, moved into a house that was already legally signed over to his daughter by his dead wife, tried to steal it with a forged deed, and didn't think to check whether the woman, who lived there for 34 years, might have read the blueprints before she left." I said, "That's about right." He said, "She tried to rewire a house that was already wired by someone smarter than both of you. Ruthann outbuilt her from the grave. That's not a con that failed, Oren. That's a woman who showed up to a job site without reading the prints. And she picked the one house in Paducah where the prints were drawn by a woman who knew exactly what she was protecting and exactly who she was protecting him from." He shook his head. He said, 14 years, 3 men. And the one who caught her draws circuit maps on legal pads for a living. She should have checked the contractor's license before she bid the job. First time in months. Pepper came in from the shop that night. She walked past the closet door where she'd been sleeping for a year. She jumped onto the bed. She curled up on Ruthann's side. First time since Connie moved in. The bed was right again. The cat knew before I did. The cat always knew. I sit on the porch now. Mornings. Coffee. The bell is above me. The clapper is clean. The tone is ready. Ruthann's warning, the last echo. She said, "Promise me you'll check the rating before you connect." I didn't keep that promise. I connected without checking. I hooked up whatever was available because I was lonely and lonely. Men make bad wiring decisions. But Ruthann didn't build those 3 walls because she thought I'd listen. She built them because she knew I wouldn't. She loved me for 34 years. She knew exactly who I was. Stubborn. Lonely. Bad at listening. Good at tracing wires. Eventually. She turned her warning into walls. The warning became wisdom. The wisdom became protection. The protection held, even when I forgot the walls were there. I'm 66 years old. I've buried a wife, rebuilt a tube amplifier, traced a circuit through 2 forged documents and 3 stolen lives, and watched the 3-year-old ring. A dinner bell like nothing in the world was ever broken. The amp works. The bell rings. The cat sleeps where she belongs. The system is clean. If you've been listening this far, thank you. If you know a man like me, share this with him. He needs to know he's not alone.